Hello. Today I want to talk about the movie Get a Clue. I watched it for the first time last night after almost 20 years, and it's a lot. It has weird military propaganda, a lot of poverty porn, weird early 2000s fashion, and an extremely nonsensical plot. So, yeah, today I want to talk about it. The movie stars Lindsay Lohan, who's obviously Disney royalty and just royalty in general. But the first scene shows that Brenda Song is also in this movie, which I did not remember, but also 2000s Disney royalty, so star-studded all around. Brenda is also very clearly the token minority in this movie. There's no other minorities in really the entire thing, so they gave her that. We find out at breakfast that Lindsay has had an article printed in the newspaper in a major news organization that rivals the New York Times about two teachers that are having an affair at her high school.
I can't believe it. And they actually ran it.
You've been selected. This is wonderful.
It's just a story about Miss Dawson and her friendship with Mr. Walker. They're both teachers at Millington.
And this is very strange because it's not even an affair. I think both of these people are single, but the story about them being together is enough to put in a major New York newspaper. So everyone's really proud. Her parents are proud. She goes to school. Everyone is real impressed.
Congratulations, Lexi. It's so exciting.
Mr. Walker and Miss Dawson? No way.
What a scandal.
What a scandal.
We meet this dude, Jack, who runs the newspaper that Lindsay is a part of at school, and he's in the entire movie. He's in it a lot, and he's the most generic white dude imaginable. Absolutely nothing distinctive about him. It's also career day at Lindsay's school, and they shoehorn in the weirdest plug for the military I've ever seen.
The life of a CIA operations officer can be a very exciting one. You get to travel the world, explore different cultures, meet lots of interesting people.
The most nonsensical thing in this entire movie is the fact that they tried to convince us that the CIA is about multiculturalism. So then Lindsay sees Mr. Walker and Miss Dawson. She sees them again having an open conversation about their relationship in the middle of a hallway, so they clearly didn't learn.
I love you.
Okay, well, I don't love you.
If you think I'll continue to pass you in these halls, you're sadly mistaken. One of us has to leave Millington, and I assure you it's not going to be me.
We move on to the next day, and we have a scene of cops pulling a car out of the East River. We find out that Mr. Walker is missing, and that is his car. And this is a huge deal.
Mr. Walker's bizarre disappearance spread faster than word of a Barney's warehouse sale.
The day moves on. Lindsay makes some weird 2000s references. Brenda wears these socks. And we eventually get to a classroom where Lindsay is pulled out of because a detective's interviewing her about Mr. Walker's disappearance. And we get the worst creative decision made in this entire movie. This man's handlebar mustache is atrocious. I need to know who cleared this. I just want to talk. So Lindsay goes on to tell this man about the conversation she saw between Mr. Walker and Miss Dawson the previous day. And she's like, yeah, they had this huge fight and they broke up, and Miss Dawson even threatened him a little bit. Yeah, it was crazy. And then she leaves, and then is surprised that the detective is now seeing Miss Dawson as a suspect after what she told him.
Oh no, that detective thinks that Miss Dawson has something to do with Mr. Walker's disappearance, and it's all my fault.
Yes, it is. Jack and Lindsay decide to investigate Mr. Walker's disappearance, and then we get a montage of fashionable outfits. I use fashionable very loosely. Even in the early 2000s, I can't imagine this outfit was in style. But throughout the entire movie, they try to convince us that Brenda and Lindsay are the most fashionable people that exist in this school. Next, Jack and Lindsay go to a spyware store to try to get a bunch of surveillance equipment for their investigation. And they run into Brenda and Gabe, who's this other kid that is in the movie that helps them investigate.
Gabe lives across the street from Miss Dawson.
And your point is?
Well, if we watch her for a few days and nothing suspicious takes place, maybe we can clear her name.
And they proceed to commit multiple privacy law infractions by setting up a camera right outside of her apartment to spy on her. While they're doing this, Lindsay and Jack go to Brooklyn to Mr. Walker's apartment to try to investigate what happened to him. And this is also a huge deal because Lindsay has never been on the subway before. So this is her first time doing poor people things.
Yes, I made it. I can't wait to tell Jennifer.
They use a lot of sound effects that I think are meant to add to the drama and suspense of what this movie is supposed to be, but it more just makes it more comical. It's really weird. Ooh, a black person. There's our representation.
Excuse us, sir.
And another black person. I love that the first real dark-skinned character of this movie is used as a jump scare because, of course, a young white woman is going to be scared by a black person's existence. This homeless man shows up at multiple points in this movie, and the entire premise of his plot line is that green coat and the fact that Lindsay said that there could only be one ugly green coat like that in the entirety of New York City.
I'm sure that was Mr. Walker's coat. I mean, how many of those hideous green frocks could there be in one city?
All of the teenagers in this movie are so incompetent. They have the storyline that Lindsay is this brilliant budding journalist, but she couldn't understand how her telling the detective about Miss Dawson and Mr. Walker's fight would lead to her being a suspect, but she can deduce incorrectly that there can only be one of these green coats in the entirety of New York City.
Okay.
Jack and Lindsay get to Mr. Walker's apartment, and this scene happens. I cried when I saw this scene. Not as a child, yesterday. This is one of the scariest scenes I've ever seen in a movie. I do not like scary movies. I don't watch them. And this is exactly why. Why would they put this in a children's movie? That was way too scary to be put in a children's movie. I think it would have been fine maybe if it was a character we'd seen before, but the fact that it was a character that didn't exist in the story before this scene, I don't know why they thought that was okay to add in. So this is a British dude that is apparently a detective, but Lindsay does not believe that he's actually a detective. And she has a foolproof reason why.
Detective meaning.
A New York detective could never afford a platinum watch, a Pumoni suit, and alligator boots.
So Jack and Lindsay then go to Jack's house, which is in Brooklyn of all places. And we proceed to have an entire scene to convince us that Jack is a really poor, sad white boy.
Everyone assumes if you go to Millington, you gotta have a doorman and a summer house and all that. We don't have any of that.
What's your mom doing home in the middle of the day?
She's an emergency room nurse. I've never been to Hawaii.
Oh.
Also, this movie is so insistent on telling us that Brooklyn is a place where only poor people live. The entire movie, all the characters are like, oh, we can't go to Brooklyn. That's like Compton, basically. That's how they treat the entirety of Brooklyn because it's not the Upper East Side. And they put in a bunch of, again, military propaganda for no reason. And they have this picture on the wall of Jack wearing the exact same Navy shirt he's wearing in this scene. They didn't have one other shirt for him to wear to take that picture. So they add in the section about his dead dad because, of course, it's a Disney movie. Someone's got to have a dead parent. And we also find out he likes bowling because he needs to be even more boring as a character.
I like to bowl.
I hear that you have to wear shoes that other people have worn.
Through a weird turn of events, they find out that Mr. Walker's real name is Nicholas Petrosian.
Nicholas Petrosian, a banker, mysteriously disappeared, and there's evidence to indicate that he may be dead. Just recently, he has been charged with fraud and embezzlement.
So then Jack finds out where Mrs. Petrosian lives using
Brooklyn common sense. I checked the phone book.
No way.
Aw, it's big brain thoughts like that that keep your hair on end, isn't it? So they find the address, they go to Brooklyn to where Mrs. Petrosian lives, and lo and behold, they find Mr. Walker. He tells them all about everything that's happened, about the embezzlement charges he had from 1987. Also, Lindsay gets a bit shady in this scene.
That's a stunning pendant you're wearing.
Oh, yeah? Well, thank you.
I would rather wear those Russian nesting dolls as a necklace than that brooch, but go off. So we also find out that someone is blackmailing Mr. Walker. He receives this letter, and the kids have to find out what hotel lobby they are supposed to be meeting in, which leads to the next scene that the writers of this movie were way too proud of.
The Fairmark.
What are you guys doing?
Just learn some new dance steps.
This is the most nonsensical scene in the entire movie, not just because I didn't need to see this 8-year-old put a black light over a piece of paper in a room that is already blacklit, but because the entire plot point that made this scene doesn't make any sense. There was no reason for the blackmailer to not tell Mr. Walker what lobby they were supposed to meet in. But the writers of this script put that in specifically to have this scene to make us watch Brenda Song do this. So on to the day that they actually meet in the hotel lobby. This scene made my head hurt.
No, not Miss Dawson.
It's Mr. Goldblum.
It's that homeless guy with Mr. Walker's coat. Mrs. P?
It's Miss Stern.
It has every peripheral character you've seen throughout the movie in this hotel lobby. They have 2 teachers that I did not feel the need to mention before this because they were completely irrelevant to the story. So Mr. Walker sits down with the dude that's blackmailing him, which we find out is that British dude from the apartment, which was very obvious. Throughout this movie, Mr. Walker has the ashiest lips I've seen on a white person in a very long time. I don't know how they had the money for that hideous handlebar mustache at the beginning, but they didn't have enough money for a single chunk of Vaseline for this man. We move on. The blackmailer runs away. We have this entire chase scene with the children going after this man. And there's also this intermittent scene of that homeless man running around and being chased. So halfway in between this chase scene, Lindsay goes into this room that is sketchily labeled as a spa, and she finds Miss Dawson tied up, looking raggedy. Turns out that someone had told Miss Dawson that she got a free spa day, and they actually ended up kidnapping her. Not the brightest bulb, that Miss Dawson. So Lindsay tells her everything that's actually happening, and at the end of this scene, Miss Dawson proceeds to get in a shower and waterboard herself for no reason. I don't know why she does this. I have to assume it's because she's trying to feel something, because she gave the most emotionally stale performance in this entire movie. So we then get to the section about the homeless man, finally. Not that I really cared about it up until this point, but we finally understand what it is. And we find out that this homeless man is actually the mayor, and he's been dressing up as a homeless man to understand how the homeless people live. And he gives this entire speech.
I am proud to stand before you today as a man with some small insight into the poverty on our streets. To some, a coat is merely an accessory. To others, a coat is a form of shelter.
This coat not only keeps the cold out, but it keeps the heat in. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Never thought of it that way.
This entire movie tries to be class conscious, and they did it exactly as well as you would expect Disney to do that. So we move on to the finale. These kids catch the blackmailer using a giant cake, and he gets arrested. And then they're about to arrest Mr. Walker too, because they were like, you still committed that embezzlement crime 15 years ago. And he's like, oh, but I didn't. And then we have a scene taken directly from Legally Blonde.
Ozian, where did you get that extremely unique bumblebee brooch?
Inside was the most magnificent piece of jewelry.
With its vivid color, unique shape, and flawless condition, it's probably worth around $10 million.
What part of the brain do you store this information?
So this brooch is apparently very expensive, and that's how the blackmailer hid the money, was by buying this brooch. And this movie is obviously made for kids, so I understand that they can have plot holes, and it's fine because children's minds like don't work linearly and they won't notice. But there are a lot of loose ends with the plot in this movie, and this is one of the biggest ones because they never explained why that brooch got on the ground in that office. How did this man, who was smart enough to embezzle $10 million and frame someone else for it for 15 years, not keep track of this brown paper bag? How did it get there? So Mr. Walker gets off for the crime, and then this happens. I don't know why, but someone on the staff of this movie, either the director, the makeup artist, the styling director, absolutely hated the actress that played Miss Dawson, because there is not a single scene in this movie where she looks even semi-decent. I would sue. And spoiler alert, the last scene of this movie, Mr. Walker and Miss Dawson get married, and they put her in the ugliest wedding dress. They were like, this is Disney. Nobody has boobs. So the movie wraps up. Everyone says they're super proud of Lindsay. We get to the final wedding, and yeah, that's pretty much it. They try to add a little bit more class consciousness in at the very end, just to try to make the entire thing have a good moral for the kids.
All right, so what about the shoes that other people have worn?
The shoes? Ew. I think I can survive wearing pre-worn shoes, guys.
Lexi, are you crazy?
Like I said, exactly what you'd expect from Disney trying to sympathize with poor people. So yeah, that's the entire movie. It was a lot. Oh, another thing. The whole thing with the homeless man, that scene with the mayor, that was the end of that. I expected there to be something about a story about Mr. Walker giving this coat to this man, because the only way that section makes any sense is if we believe what Lindsay said previously, that there could only be one of these coats in the entirety of New York City, which makes absolutely no sense. So I was like, oh, they're going to add a section about how Mr. Walker gave him this coat just to try to convince us that he's like a nicer person and he didn't deserve everything that happened to him, blah, blah, blah. No, they just ended with the man saying that this coat is shelter, and that was it. And I was like, what? Okay. So overall, this movie was such a mess. I expected to just feel the nostalgia from the early 2000s watching this movie, and I was honestly just really confused the entire time. But it has Lindsay Lohan in it, so how bad could it really be? And yeah, that was that movie. Let me know if you like this movie, or if you've watched it as an adult and you were also as confused as I was. So yeah.